We are live. Hello, everyone. It's me, David Chen from Decoding TV, a podcast about television, broadcasting live right now at youtube.com/@decodingtv. It's time to get to our coverage of the Peacemaker Season 2 finale. Joining me for this is, of course, Patrick Klepek as usual. Patrick, how goes it this evening?
Go, hopefully by the end of this podcast, I'm also saying go Cubs go. We got a playoff game going on while I'm recording a Peacemaker Season 2 finale podcast. You can't stop me. I got so much going on right now.
Joining us also, he is the co-host of the Amazing Spider Talk podcast. You can also find his wonderful recaps of Peacemaker Season 2 over at decodingtv.com, the free newsletter that you should subscribe to. Dan Gvozden, welcome back to Decoding TV.
I'm thrilled to be here, and my evening's going so well that this podcast might tick over to Friday for me.
That's how you know it's going well. Well, welcome to the podcast. We're here to discuss the Season 2 finale, Season 2, Episode 8 of Peacemaker, entitled Full Nelson. But before we get to that, I do just want to acknowledge one comment about last week's episode. And I guess we have to talk about it now because I don't think this episode really dwelled too much on the themes of last week's episode. So this comment comes in from JP Halsky and talking about the big reveal that happened at the end of last week's Peacemaker, where you find, or during the last couple episodes, where you find out what happened in the other dimension. JP Halsky writes at decodingtv.com, quote, "My take is that the episode actually did something very bold and maybe more meta than people will recognize. When Chris turns his head and sees the mural he somehow missed, this is played for laughs, but I think it's also the central theme of the alternate universe. It was incredibly easy for Chris to not see the white supremacy. It's invisible to many white people. A TV show that's majority or even 100% white doesn't read to many people as Nazi. It reads as prime time. All the consequences of white supremacy are tucked away or just off screen in ways that we find easy and convenient to ignore. But the instant even a single black person appears, it is so jarring to this world that every man, woman, and child instantly transforms into a lynch mob. The hate and horror of it all was just below the surface. But every other second of the day, in every other way, a Nazi planet actually wouldn't look that different than the world we accept today as not as bad as it could be." That was, in my opinion, an incredibly searing critique on our world and our entertainment. And through that lens, when Augie gave an impassioned defense for doing the best you can under the circumstances, he was simultaneously a defense and an indictment of all the real-world horrors that we tolerate, because we're human. It's our more redeeming and condemnable quality. Augie deserved to get stabbed to death, and it was also a tragedy. What do you guys think? Dan Gvozden, what do you think of that sentiment? I actually did find it also pretty subversive, the idea that, like, there was this funny moment when he's like, "Did you not notice the Hitler on the wall and the Mein Kampf everywhere?" And Chris is like, "Oh, how did I miss that?" And it's very funny in the show, but I think it is also a commentary on how often white people can miss what's going on right under the surface. Gvozden, what do you think?
Yeah, I've been wrestling with this a lot since you sent me that wonderful commentary almost a week ago now, David, and I wrote my piece for the newsletter because I wasn't on the last episode of the show to really offer my 2 cents about how wrong I was about the nature of the genesis of this world.
Right.
But I think the point is really well made in that commentary, but and maybe I was hoping for a different show, but I find the sort of like holding up Hitler as the sort of like signifier of Nazism and all of that stuff. Just, I was hoping for something a little more subtle, the sort of exploring how Chris could miss something like a world being only white people instead of something as bold as Hitler murals on the wall and Mein Kampf books on the table. And I expressed, I think, as much to you in the conversation that we had, David, that, I have a lot of relatives in my family that are, big MAGA supporters and are very like behind white supremacist ideologies, but would never say of themselves, "Oh yes, I'm a white supremacist." and they use images like the KKK, people in white hoods and Hitler as a sort of, well, I'm not a white supremacist. White supremacists look like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think by kind of like including an image like that, it does allow the show to kind of I don't know if it's letting Chris off the hook, although we can talk about that in this episode, which I don't think really like dives much deeper into holding Chris accountable for his sort of missing Nazism taking over the world. And like, I think that's fine by the sort of like language of the show. And I think you can interpret it in the way that this person who wrote to you has. And I think it's a totally fine and great read of it. I was kind of just hoping for something that explored it a little more subtly, given that I think a lot of people like manage to avoid thinking about their own behaviors and how much it is tied to white supremacy, even if they don't see themselves as someone that would go out and put on a white hood and and join in with the Klan marching down the street, if you get what I'm saying.
I think I do get what you're saying, right? You're saying when people see in the show, oh, Chris missed that there's Mein Kampf on every table. I, an innocent human, would never do what Chris is doing. Therefore, I need not think any further about what the show is trying to say.
Right. Whereas if it was more subtle, people could ask, well, wait a minute, where is the thing that I'm missing in my life in the same way that Chris is,
right.
Or even just reflect on themselves. Like, I didn't notice that everybody in the background of the show was only white people.
Yeah.
Like, what does that say about me, the viewer? And I guess you could still have that critique because the joke is like still there, but to me, at least, it kind of swept it under the rug a little bit rather than dealing with it straight on.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Patrick Klepek, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with Dan, and I think a lot of his analysis lines up with a bit of what I read said on the podcast last week. The thing I thought of coming out of that episode was, you can sort of excuse yourself, like, how did I not pick up what the show was communicating in terms of the demographic of the actors? Like, well, I don't control the camera. Like, it could always just be sort of off screen.
Totally.
But I do think one of the lessons you can take from the episode and sort of the messages communicating is, what are the things in your life that you are either actively filtering or passively filtering, and then just getting up and going on with the rest of what's important to you that day. I mean, I'm in Illinois right now, right? Like, the National Guard has been set in. Ice raids are happening all over the place. I still got to take my kids to school. And what do you do in the face of like, wow, my state's kind of being invaded, but it's like 45 minutes away. Not really happening to me over here, but like 45 minutes away. It's pretty fucked up. Got to get there by 8:30 because the second bell's going to ring, and then my kids are getting in trouble if they don't get into the school. So it's, that's something that I was thinking about coming out of the episode was that reading of it was like, what is the equivalent in your life based on like what's happening around you that, hey, you can just look past that because either it's right in front of you in a funny sort of way, like a poster on the wall, or it's like a news report or something that's like just far enough away that you can just keep walking down the street and go on with your life. But what meaningful contribution are you making to try and push back on that within, the constraints that you have to also get your kids to school on time before the second bell rings so that they can make it to class?
Indeed. Sounds like we all agree that there's some thought-provoking ideas from the last batch of episodes, and that maybe the show could have teased them out a little bit more potentially, but that we're glad that it's taking a shot. I mean, one of the things that really does strike me about this season of Peacemaker is that at least he tried. You know what I mean? And what I mean by that is, look at
well, here's the bar. We're throwing it on the floor.
But I mean, look at Apple TV. Like, Warner Brothers didn't take this off the air because it's like, oh, there's Nazis, and like, don't want to piss off the people that might be upset about Nazis getting it taken to them. Which is something we saw with Apple TV Plus and Savant.
Sure.
They postponed the release of that show because they're worried about political blowback. This aired, and so far it has not seemed to cause a ruckus. But we will see if that actually ends up being the case. Regardless,
the biggest like cultural reflection of this is just an emote being removed from Fortnite. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
brought back with different hand gestures. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that, but I meant to mention it, right? That so just to be clear, in the game Fortnite, you can play as Peacemaker, and there's an emote where he does the dance that he does in the opening credits of Peacemaker. And some people have pointed out that this dance actually resembles a Nazi swastika. And therefore they're like, we didn't know that Fortnite was like, we didn't know that was the case. So they took it off, offline after last week's episode or a couple weeks episodes ago. Which
They
I thought
brought it back today. I think just he's not doing the hand gestures simultaneously.
Which I thought was just kind of odd because, well, first of all, I think it's a stretch in my opinion to interpret that as a Nazi swastika, like the actual motion that he does. But then separately, you would think that when they're setting up this partnership, somebody would say to the marketing people at Fortnite, "Hey, BT Dubs, FY, there's going to be a massive plot development later on that you just might want to be aware of." And I guess that conversation just never happened, or it happened at a low level and never. Yeah.
James
I don't think it's a massive stretch.
No, yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
But also, like James Gunn was saying, 5 people saw these episodes. This is why it's such a big surprise. Like, no, they didn't. No, they didn't. 5 people didn't see these episodes. Like, shut up. Like,
I mean, even if 5 people did see the episodes, like, how many people read the scripts or knew the story? Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, anyway, okay. So that's some stuff about what happened in the last couple weeks. I did think that there were some thought-provoking elements of Earth X or the Nazi Dimension. I wish the show had explored them more deeply. And in fact, I don't think this episode really explores it at all, right? Like that was it. What we got in the last couple of weeks was it. So
goodbye,
all that
Earth
said,
X.
yeah, bye Earth X, goodbye. Okay, so all that said, we are now at the season finale of Peacemaker season 2, and I am curious overall thoughts on the finale, how you feel it tied up the season, and then we'll talk about what actually happened this episode. Patrick Klepek, let's start with you.
I think as a season finale to an ongoing show, I thought it had real highs, a little disappointing in terms of cliffhanger. As a prequel to Man of Tomorrow, wow, really overselling the amount of what happens in this season and how much can be explained away in, I don't know, 3/4 of a sentence. So I don't know if saying Man of Tomorrow prequel, this seems very heavy-handed on Gunn's part, which also could be a compliment, depending on how you want to interpret the connective tissue between the different elements of this universe. But real high emotional highs. But I'm with you. I came out of this episode really disappointed at this season's relationship with Earth X and how much it wanted to sit with that. And boy, just using a deeply racially charged parallel universe as a plot twist, and then to not sit with that at all feels a little weird, even if I think what happens on Earth X was handled pretty responsibly. But I like where Chris ends up. I like where a lot of the characters end up. I'm very mixed on the cliffhanger, which we can get to, and sort of what it implies about the future of this little corner of the world, given that these seasons tend to come 2 to 3 years later, and how Gunn is going to handle that. But I enjoyed it. I was kind of hoping, based on where we were at, there'd be a little more of a bow on everything. Not that everything was going to be happy, but I thought it was going to be a little more of a concluding note of Peacemaker's role before we pick it up somewhere else. And instead, we're left with the most cliffhangery of cliffhangery things. And that's a slightly strange place to be with a show that I was expecting a different moment at the finish line.
I agree. I kind of feel very similarly, but Dan Gvozden, I want to hear from you. You've been writing brilliantly about season 2 of Peacemaker over at decodingtv.com. What do you think of the finale?
Well, I appreciate you setting me up that way.
So what comes out of Dan's mouth next is going to be just pearls of wisdom.
Yeah, it better be. Yeah,
that-
having just concluded watching this mere moments ago. I liked a lot of elements of this final episode. It was definitely, I thought, more uplifting than I expected. Whether it be all the musical montages of
A
songs
lot.
I've never
So many.
heard before.
Yeah.
How many concerts did we go
like
to?
two full length songs, basically 2 full length songs.
We got to hear more of the intro. Like, oh, there's another verse in this song. We're
Right.
doing the extra verse from the intro to Peacemaker season 2.
Yeah, two full length songs and at least one kind of musical number with like Adebayo walking into the room and so it was a lot. But okay, anyway, putting that aside,
how many shows end on a montage of the song called "Fucking My Heart in the Ass"? So not many. But I'm not even joking about that. But
No, you're not. I had to rewind a couple of times. Like, is that actually what the lyrics of the song are? Is the show screwing with me? No, it is not. No, it is not.
And that's one of the most visually exciting parts of the whole episode is they're exploring all these other worlds, and that's all very fun. I was expecting maybe a little bit more like render in a final Peacemaker episode, as it tends to like really lean deep into this, and there are moments of that. But I think as much fun as so many elements of this are, and how much sort of satisfying moments we've been waiting for like a lot of these characters to have, like, man, I was really glad that Adebayo and Kia said goodbye to each other, because I wanted to do that in episode 1 of this season, but because that was a relationship I was not bought into. But I think it cheats on a lot of these characters' journeys at the very end, and has the journeys end because that's where we are, rather than making the logical steps that needed to get us there. It doesn't mean that they're not satisfying in their own way. I just know that they could have been more satisfying given Gunn's history as a writer and how much time we spent on other stuff that, like Earth X, that like didn't. Looking back on it, doesn't even maybe even need to did we need all the Nazi stuff? I don't think so. I'm not begrudging it, but
right. But was it critical to where these characters end up at the end of the season?
We'll get into it. There is a beat that big beat in this episode that is reinforced by their experiences there, but those experiences could have anything. They'd be in anything. They didn't need to be delving into as Patrick said, like a deeply troubling racial, plot line that we didn't really fully unpack. So there's a lot to like, a lot that I felt, kind of unsatisfied by as someone who's really like charted these characters, but it's more Peacemaker, and I think its best elements also still sing here. So, quite literally, yeah.
So, I'm pretty torn about it. Again, as Dan Gvozden indicated, we just finished watching it, so like maybe it'll change upon further reflection. I think my feelings on it are mild disappointment, but that I overall had a good time with this season. I don't think like people shouldn't watch it or anything like that. It's like I think that the way that they handled the Earth X stuff started so intriguingly, and then they didn't end up doing that much with it. In my opinion, we can talk, like, as you said, Dan, there's a big beat where that kind of like pays off the Earth X stuff.
Where's Keith?
I mean, who knows? But
see you in 3 years when season 3 goes into production.
Right. I mean, I think that season 1 of Peacemaker ends with Christopher Smith realizing that his found family is more important than his actual family, right? And turning his back on his fucked up libertarian ideals and bizarre Christo-fascist ideology, and being like, hey, I actually care about like the people around me. And then season 2 ends in a very similar place. That's the thing. Is like I had hoped that they would kind of take it in a different direction, and the Earth X like opens the door to do that in a really big and interesting way. And I don't
They
think they
did
did that.
all the work.
Yeah. They did all the work, and then it just ends kind of in a very similar place to season 1, which is not a horrible place. You know, it's not it's not like, oh, that's a bad place to end, but it's kind of like, I feel like I already saw this. Like season 1 was him realizing, hey, like these people are important to me. Like this family is important to me. And that's exactly what happens at the end of season 2 as well. A little bit with some variations. So that's why I'm a little bit disappointed. But let's talk about what actually happened this episode. Okay, let's talk about what actually happened this episode. So, Dan Gvozden, you and I both have some notes about this. So, like, if I miss anything significant, feel free to let me know. So I'm reading now from notes. So we start with a flashback in this episode to 1 month ago. Big Belly Burger, Chris and Amelia are on a date. They're bonding. And then they go on a boat to where this band, Nelson, is playing. I'm reading here from Men's Journal. It's already written up a recap of this episode. In a big flashback, we learned that Chris and Amelia briefly went on a rock cruise, which featured the duo Nelson. In case you forgot, Nelson is a pseudo-hair metal rock band consisting of Matthew and Gunnar Nelson, who are twin brothers and the sons of Ricky Nelson and Kristen Nelson. Perhaps most famous for the 1990 hit, Can't Live Without Your Love and Affection, in Peacemaker, Nelson instead plays a 2010 track called To Get Back to You, end quote. So, and boy, do they play it in its entirety. And then later we see that, it concludes with them kissing, and it's like a very epic moment. And then later on in the episode, Amelia admits, actually, it did mean something to me that we kissed him and everything, and she just didn't want to admit it. And that's supposed to be like a really big cathartic moment for the show. And look, I don't know that it fully worked for me, but I will say there is something that I really appreciate about James Gunn's earnestness. Right, there's something about just like, hey, this is like James Gunn likes like these like emotions of the girl said she liked me, and there's something about like the girl said she liked me. There's like a simplicity to it that's really lovely. But anyway, yeah, Gvozden, what do you think about kind of like you've been beefing with how this show has been handling the whole Amelia subplot all season? How did you think? How did you feel about where the Chris Amelia thing landed at the end of this episode?
Well, first I wanted to point out they meet at Big Belly Burger, which is this kind of like ongoing joke across all of the DC movies and comics. It's like the one consistent thing across the DC multiverse, this fast food restaurant. And it's been in a bunch of their movies up to this point. So I thought it was funny that was where we started this episode off. But I'll keep it on burgers. I haven't been beefing. See, that's a really bad pun. With their relationship the whole season. I think it's been handled in an interesting way, and I really appreciated the conversation that they had at Argus in what was it, 2 episodes ago?
Yeah.
Now, it gets you right up to the point of them like finally having to be true to each other, or her to admit her feelings, and we don't quite get there. And I've liked most of that stuff, but I was waiting for her to really like hold him accountable for, hey, what does it mean that you could be with someone that looked like me but is nothing like me? Do you actually like me for all of the trouble that I am? And the moment that I felt was really a big letdown was last episode's moment where she just embraces him on the motorcycle and puts her head on his shoulder. And I felt like he hadn't earned that at all. Nothing had changed for them. And I feel like the same is kind of true here, where she suddenly admits, like you said, that it did mean everything to her. But I don't really feel like Chris had to do anything to get that out of her other than to keep badgering her with the question. I mean, even in the scene that precedes it, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, where it's all of them together admitting their feelings for Chris, what do we get out of him? They say to him, like, we're going to make a big stand, and I know we're going to talk about it. And we don't get to see his response to that. And they all just leave his hotel room, and then he comes out and talks to her. He needs this answer. But
right,
what
like
is it that this time really gets her to do it?
Yeah, you don't really get, like, it's a moment. He is swayed by them in that big scene with all the 11th Street kids in the hotel room. But there's no big moment where he's like, "You're right, guys. I do accept it. I was okay with how it played out." But I understand you're saying like we don't necessarily witness the change in Chris that you would want to see for like Amelia and him to kind of have that big moment, right?
I guess, yeah, I don't know that I totally knew how Chris responded to them,
Right.
like moving him, because it immediately cuts away from him. We don't really see his response. His response is him coming after her and saying, like, did it mean something? And she finally, after another pressing of it, tells him, I just needed to know what she had seen change in him or whatever for her to admit that.
My interpretation was he is swayed by them, and that's why he ends up forming the new organization. Like he does kind of have a change of heart in that moment. That was my interpretation.
But why is she swayed? That's what I want to know. Why does she?
Because he has a change of heart. Because he has a change, But okay, fair enough. You weren't swayed by that. Patrick Klepek, any thoughts on the Chris Amelia relationship in this episode?
I mean, I think what Dan's getting at is part of my problem with the episode in general, which is that, look, I love a good montage. This episode is so self-indulgent in using montage in place of actual character development. Like, it is indulgent to the point of kind of absurdity, even though I like the song. It's like, yeah, I get it. Like the lyrics are communicating like some stuff that's going on as we like experience the passage of time. Okay. But I think he deploys it 3 times across like the episode and its running time. And I found the yada yada yadaing that I think Dan is getting at here to be especially annoying, as exaggerated by the overindulgent use of like montages and like, let's listen to a whole song while we cut between scenes of characters looking at each other. And I just would have rather have had more moments like the scene of the hotel where they all talk to Chris is really powerful, except that it's like surrounded by moments that aren't as powerful. And so it's sort of like, okay, we got to have a moment where they all talk to each other. And I would have rather had more of that throughout the episode. So it's a very, I find myself in a similar place to Dan, in which I buy where the pieces end up. It feels like, I feel like I missed an episode. Like, shouldn't Chris have reckoned with like everything that happened in Earth X like a little bit longer than everyone saying, I love you, bro, in a hotel room, which is essentially what happens. Like, we're not going to talk about like the Nazi planet that we were just on.
or even more simply than that, just that like the whole point of the Nazi planet is he went there and he chose to abandon his found family for this other family.
Yes.
And we're not going to address the fact that, hey, we love you, man, even though you abandoned us, and you're doing it again now.
I think they do address it a little bit, right? Lee does say to him, hey, you knew it was the wrong thing to go to the Earth X, right? Deep down in your heart. And really, it's because you're not listening to your own conscience. That's the problem behind all of this. I should point out, by the way, we are broadcasting live at youtube.com/@decodingtv. We have a few dozen people in the room. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good evening. And people are commenting. And by the way, in general, they are not happy with the finale of the season, I have to say. The comments are not happy. I'm going to read a smattering of them right now. Johnny in the chat says, this was the worst episode of the season. Vincent writes, I don't understand the choice of spending 6 increasingly shorter episodes setting up a comedic Nazi bit for one episode and then having like 5 montages in the last episode to handwave over plot. John writes, the episode was baffling to me. Parts of it were just a long music video with montages. So those are some of the comments in the chat.
Not wrong. So far, I can't. You know what, chat? I think you're onto something here. You want to do the podcast?
Dave, can I respond to something that you just said about the Adebayo character? Because, like, to me, this is like one of the biggest problems in the episode too, and it's been an ongoing problem, I think, with several key moments in the season, which is like there's that whole like the magical black character trope, and I really feel like Adebayo kind of like portrays that in such a like, I don't know if it's necessarily a bad way here, but she is the sort of like voice of James Gunn who always has the perfect thing to say about every character. Like, Chris, you knew you shouldn't have gone in that door because you knew it deep down. like she's the living embodiment of like subtext is for suckers. She's just saying the themes out loud, and it's such a shortcut in so many instances, especially in this episode, to just like getting past character hangups, whether it's with her wife or who she magically now has this new partner in Bordeaux. But like, I just feel like that the Adebayo character is specifically used to deploy this, throughout this episode. Yes, she's Chris's close friend that gets him better than anyone, but having her say it is not the same as the characters having to actually kind of like wrestle with it and work past it.
Or have Harcourt say it, right? Like the whole tension is between like Harcourt
Right.
understanding her trauma and how she expresses that destructively, how that means that she is not worthy of love and acceptance as a flawed person. And so many of the things that Adebayo expresses would have been much more meaningful given that Chris and Harcourt are sort of on similar destructive wavelengths. And instead it's all this like hang up over what happened on the boat. And I'm with Dan. I think I would have found a lot of the same themes more powerful coming from someone like Harcourt, who would been, we can get there to get, like, we can find a space with ourselves, between ourselves to like, not necessarily be better people, but accept the fucked up people that we are and still be deserving of love. And instead it kind of comes from like the purest, nicest character in the show, who also happens to be like the sole black character in a season about a Nazi parallel planet that yells a black got out. Like this again, like I'm not accusing Gunn of being bad faith, but it's once you start pulling in all these weighty themes, you got to start landing some of these planes, and I feel like they get a pretty wobbly towards the end here of this season.
I just kept wanting to shout, like, do you realize what trope you're engaging in right now, Gunn?
I think one thing that's indisputable is that this season had pacing issues. Like, I think everyone agrees this season had pacing issues, and it was a problem. And I will say the Leota plotline, I think that character is just very underserved. It felt like they wanted to give that character a subplot, and what we got was very underwritten, in my opinion. But I gotta say, like, here's the thing. There's a lot of beef I have with the path we took to get to here, but like, I don't have that strong a beef with like where things ended necessarily. You know what I'm saying? Like, and what in the case of Leota's plotline, she has a conversation with her ex-wife or ex-girlfriend, or ex-wife, I think it is, and it is a very mature conversation, right? It's like it is a conversation that's basically saying sometimes love is not enough. Sometimes just because you love someone, it's not enough to like make life work. And I think that's like a very mature thing to realize. I don't think the show really made that point in a very convincing way this season, but like, I think that it's like, oh, that is a truth that I believe and that more people need to understand. Just watch Love is Blind, which, by the way, we're covering over at Decoding Reality right now.
I can feel like I can hear like James Gunn's therapy sessions like coming like right out of the characters' mouths, like, like, and I don't mean that in like a cynical way, because I agree it's really touching in it, but like, and it's clearly like something that came from a real place of understanding about what makes a relationship work or not work. And I know that this material is super close to him. So like I applaud it. I agree with you. I think it's really touching, and I love like hearing a writer write lines like that do touch like on real human truths. Yeah,
absolutely. So whether or not like the season did a good job of selling that, whatever, but I like where it landed, which is true of probably several things this episode. Okay, so anyway, what else happens this season? Argus agents go into the dimensional portal to investigate what's going on in there. They enter a Candyland-style world where they are suddenly beset upon by a ton of deadly gremlins. It's a horrifying attack, and one of them, Klein, dies in the process. It becomes clear that Argus is looking for an Earth-like planet that is unpopulated, and then later on we learn that Flag is looking to create a prison for metahumans in another dimension. Now, Dan Gvozden, you actually pointed out, I think in your recap, right, that there is some significance to the fact that when Happerson is looking for the portals, last episode he says, "Oh, like our portals always had a wobble. Like the portals created with this dimensional device from aliens has no wobble." What is the significance of that, Dan? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'll try to keep this as short as possible.
Yes.
Famous
But
last words before somebody launches into a lore discussion.
yeah. I mean, look, cast yourself back to either Justice League movie or either version of the Justice League where the big thing everybody was chasing after was the mother box. That computer looking thing that could open dimensional portals and all that stuff. This is a device that is like one of the main like tenets of the DC Comics universe. And it's basically a supercomputer that was created by the residents of like Apocalypse and the Fourth World characters, which are a Jack Kirby creation. Most people would know like Darkseid, the sort of big bad that was teased in Justice League. And they had these devices, the mother boxes, these supercomputers, and basically they can open portals called boom tubes. It's a real thing in DC Comics. And I speculate that whatever this device is they got from this little like gremlin alien looking thing at the beginning of the season is a mother box. It's basically the all powerful, like do whatever device in DC Comics and the movies. And the fact that it's not wobbling suggests it's a very powerful portal of some kind that Rick Flag Sr. knows about and wants to get a hold of. And I found it interesting in this episode, they call this other planet, they eventually discover Salvation. And this is to tie into some of your other stuff. In DC Comics in 2007, there was a George R.R. Martin pitch that was turned into a short comics run called Salvation Run, where basically the same thing that we see happening here happens there. They use a mother box to open a boom tube portal to a planet called Salvation, where they abandon supervillains and members of the Suicide Squad to lock them away in this prison to do war with each other. And eventually stuff goes crazy there and they break out, as you will. So I don't know if any of that made any sense. I barely made sense of it to myself.
No, that was good,
to
Dan.
say this will all likely culminate in a much bigger thing than even we know now that will tie back into sort of the larger mythos of the DC verse, with truly the large gods of this world, Darkseid being probably the most well-known one.
Well, thank you for that, Dan. Appreciate the lore dump. And yeah, but essentially just the fact that it's not wobbling is very significant in DC lore, right? Is kind of to summarize everything you said into one sentence.
Now, if you could repeat that back, David,
No,
then
hold
we
on.
would
I think
really
I
be
can
on
do
a
it. I
roll
can do
here.
it in 2 words. I can do it in two
Yes.
words.
Yes.
Boom tube.
I think that's
Boom
one word,
tube.
actually.
Is it? Is it one word? Is it one word?
Yeah.
It is one word, yes.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. All right. Well, that's even better. I'm even shorter explanation.
I thought the Candyland world was kind of cool, and the way it's executed is suitably horrifying. That one of them, their face gets eaten. You know, it's like classic Gunn of someone's face getting smashed in. Like that happens a lot in James Gunn movies for some reason. So classic. But anyway, it becomes clear that that's what Flag is doing, and Bordeaux is pretty pissed because A, lot of her friends died to build this prison, and B, she herself is a metahuman, if I'm not mistaken. So she decides, yeah, go ahead, Dan. We're going to say something?
I was going to say the most horrifying thing about all of that is that in 10 years' time, you'll be able to have the conversation that I just had with you with your mother, and she'll understand all of it.
Anyway, so Bordeaux decides to meet with Amelia. By the way, Seattle KO in the chat says, like Slither. That's not even the movie I was thinking of. I was thinking of Super, where like it's a common thing in James Gunn movies where someone will get attacked and then you'll turn their body over and then their face is gone. That's like a common thing.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, so
I like the giant skull crabs. They were my favorite.
So, like, re- I, I just want to say it's weird that so much effort was put into those sequences because like those sequences are fun, but they seem to have no real bearing on any of the like themes of
They're
the episode.
elaborate too.
Yeah, they're super
Like
elaborate.
for like, hey, James Gunn's like this episode, finally a long one. Now, could we have cut this also down to a montage with a song attached to it, and it would have been about 2.5 minutes? Sure. Are we going to do it for about 15 to 16 minutes? You bet your ass we are.
Well, to be fair, they did do a bunch of it in montage. But yes, you're right. There was this extended sequence in the Candyland world. It was suitably horrifying. And yeah, seemingly like it drives the plot, but has no thematic resonance with what's going on from what I can tell. But anyway, Bordeaux is so pissed. She teams up with Amelia. She feels
hold on.
used.
Why, hold on. Like, back up. Why? I didn't buy this.
I didn't buy this either. She
like,
does realize
you
she's the bad guy.
with Rick Flag Sr. and like he seems like a fucking weirdo that's like really aggressive and like being guided purely by like the death of his son and like wait, weren't we super pissed at Peacemaker? Like it's her turning ally. None of that felt earned for me like at all. I don't know.
Well, I think the way that they're trying to convince you it's earned is seeing all of these people die, right? Like she's part of this crew, and then like all these people die, and if you saw all your people die, then it's like you'd want it to be for something meaningful.
Are
and
these
I guess
her
she
friends?
just
Have we met these characters before? Like, you know what? I just...
well, she definitely was doing Argus missions with them earlier in the season, you know. So
I guess my question
they're
is,
her coworkers. They're coworkers. You know, imagine if you saw all your remap radio buddies die in the process of building a prison, Patrick.
More
You'd
money
probably
for
be
me.
like,
Time to solo podcast. Let's go.
Dan, go ahead.
I think the question is, why isn't a prison meaningful to her?
Right, like
Do you get what I'm
what's
saying?
wrong?
Like-
what's wrong with the idea of building a prison? Right, like what is
Right.
to her?
Yeah, I mean, like, look, maybe you and I, we all agree, like, prison's not great, but like, she seems not like, first of all, she's a cyborg, there's that really weird image of like her, I guess, like after she and Rick Flag have had sex and he it looks like
Yes.
happy and she's like dissociating like on the side of the bed. And it's like, was she not satisfied? Is she incapable of like because she's a cyborg or whatever? Like,
I'm in my own prison of this badness.
Yes. Yeah. Is that the real reason she wants out? And like there is this moment in the episode where Hardcore throws back at her like, oh, you're only unhappy that it's a prison because you're a metahuman. Right. But like we don't unpack that at all either. Is that true? I don't know. It certainly doesn't seem like it because moments later she's helping out with their security agency. It's like, okay, cool. If you're going that way, like there's a lot to unpack here. You started to address it, but then you just ignored it.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the basic pacing issues because I do think a theme running through this episode and last episode, right, and through the season is complicity, right? Like the nature of complicity, the nature of like what does it take for you to go along with the horrors that are happening, and what does it take for you to break from them? And Augie in his speech talks about it, and Bordeaux in this episode kind of addresses it. Does the show do a great job of it? I don't know. I mean, like I kind of am with you guys that it's not, but I like that it's trying. I mean, Bryce in the chat says the last episode is about government agents quitting their job because they don't want to help build a prison for a minority population. Gun is wild, LOL, end quote. And yeah, I admire the effort, even if the execution was not great. But yeah, you're right. Like Bordeaux's sudden change, they could have explained it more. So I definitely agree with that.
And that even goes into Adebayo's speech in the hotel room, where she's like, we're gonna take a stand and do something. Like, great, I agree with that too. I'm so glad the characters got to that place.
Right. Well, yeah. So let's talk about the big moment, right? Chris gathers with the 11th Street kids in a hotel room. So essentially, what happens is they use Bordeaux's Peacemaker clearance. Like, remember, guys, A plot point that was introduced at the beginning of the Suicide Squad is each of these people have an explosive device in their heads
Right.
that can track
Right.
them. And so it's like, well, can you find Chris using that? Well, we don't have clearance to look at Peacemaker's location. Well, Bordeaux does. So that's how they are able to locate Chris. That's why it's important that she turns against everyone. And so they find Chris, they meet at the hotel, and then Leota gives an impassioned speech, tries to convince Chris that he has good inside him after all. And then shortly after, the crew form a new organization called Checkmate, intended to make the world better for everyone. So this is kind of the big emotional climax of the episode. And Patrick Klepek, I think we know how Dan feels about this. Patrick Klepek, like, any thoughts? Like, did you find this convincing? Did you find it satisfying? What do you think?
Another montage, like this one goes on for a really long time too. Like, wow, this seems like it took a long time to film.
I was like, why are they?
Shots.
I literally thought, by the way, that they were like building.
I thought it was a bit. I thought it was a dream sequence, or
I thought there was going to be some kind of heist. Like they're going to take down Argus, and so they're building this building to, like, they're putting all these desks there to, like, take down Argus, and then, like, literally it's just, they're forming this organization who, like, we don't even really know.
Bureaucracy. We've got our own one.
This montage is so long that the ads version of HBO Max cuts it in half with an ad, and I came back from the ad and the music was still playing.
That's incredible. Again, I think it's underlines a theme of our reaction to the episode in general, is that, yeah, this makes sense, but it feels indulgent, it feels rushed. I wish there was a little more articulation of why, what's the mission, what are they trying to do? I don't like. They got an office. Would you want an office? Would you want to be public? Like with a lease, with like what you're, I don't know. It's just, I like them working together. I want that, like, this group in a room. Like that's the fun of the show, is the push and pull of, like, taking them out, putting them back in. But I mean, the show gives you that moment and then immediately jettisons Chris out of that in a way that feels a little unsatisfying. And by the end of it all.
They missed a moment to have the guy calling back in for more sex work at their new offices.
That's true.
I do want to read some comments in the chat about these moments. First of all, Seattle KO says, I have questions on how hard it would be to quit a government agency with all the top secret stuff they know. Decent point.
And then continue to recruit out from under their nose, because, like, Fleury ends up joining them. And
Fleury joins them.
Really feels like there'd be a conflict of interest that, like, your contract would prevent you from going over there.
Did they really explain, like, the whole Fleury thing? Right? Was that?
No, that's why I thought it was maybe a dream sequence or some sort of. I thought there was going to be some sort of twist at the end there, different than the one that actually occurs.
Hey there, that you in the chat says Rick Flag Sr. made a 360-degree turn when he was portrayed as Nick Fury of the DC Universe, being pro-metahumans in Creature Commandos and Superman, end quote. I think you mean 180, by the way, but apparently, right, like, he was portrayed as pro-metahumans. Like, was he I didn't see Creature Commandos. Was he portrayed as pro-metahumans in Superman?
I don't know that I agree with that, potentially, but in Creature Commandos, he's, like, teamed up with a bunch of metahumans the whole show, right,
but Amanda Waller teamed up with metahumans as well. She wasn't, like, super over the moon about them.
What
else here? Vigilante being the Tony Seattle KO writes, Vigilante being the Tony Stark of the agency and funding the operation is kind of funny.
Yes.
And Seattle K also says, Gunn said he wrote this whole season of Peacemaker while on vacation, and it kind of shows. So he
not only said that, but in the same interview or commentary, I know exactly where this person is talking about. He also said he was struggling to figure out what the season was about. What am I writing? And I feel like you feel that in this season as well. How much of that is? I think that's less. What do you do with the second season of this character? Because I think this character is, like, some of the most reflective of Gunn and his personality and the characters he writes over the course of his career, going all back to the Trauma days. But how do you do that and also slot it in a universe? I feel like you feel that tension in this season a lot and leads to a lot of the messiness and sloppiness that is different than the messiness of Marvel trying to accomplish a similar sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that far off from being what it needs to be. I just think in these past 2 episodes, it's just shortchanged the journey by doing it too quickly. You know, I think the pieces are there for it to have been like a full, full-throated statement about these characters. It's just we yada via montage and other things, to get there in the end. And you begin asking questions about why did we need a big twist with Earth X? Why did we need all of these things when, you were going to do, it's not quite the same as like Lost, but Lost, the big ending and Lost, being what it is, it's like, why did we need all the polar bears and the, all that other stuff if it was just going to be about the characters in the end? Like, don't try to tell me this show is always about the characters. You had a Nazi dimension in it, explore that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as the episode comes to an end, Argus apprehends Chris and drops him into the prison dimension. And Rick Flag Sr. says, "This is for Ricky." Finally having achieved the revenge that he had sought all season after all. So, yeah, that's where the season ends. Any thoughts on where that leaves us for the next Superman movie, Man of Tomorrow, or this show? I am disappointed that it is a cliffhanger. It would have been nice for it to be a complete story. Yeah. Patrick Klepek, thoughts on the ending of this episode?
Well, it's funny because insofar as what it means for the Superman sequel movie, Man of Tomorrow, I actually think it'd be very funny if like Peacemaker briefly shows up in the movie, but it's a blink and you miss it sort of moment in the film. It's very easy for me to imagine that this season as a prequel or like connective tissue to Man of Tomorrow is basically just like Lex Luthor worked with the government and found like a prison for metahumans, and that is a crucial plot point that sets up whatever Brainiac stuff, presumably is happening in the sequel, but that all we get is a brief flash of like Peacemaker, like in the midst of all of this, like sneaking out, like, and that's how he gets out, is just like in the midst of some sort of weird jailbreak on that planet. Blink and you miss it, sets up like a Peacemaker season 3 sort of situation. I'd love if he's not actually a character in Man of Tomorrow. He is just briefly there incidentally as a result of the other things that are happening, which would be a fun and funny way of balancing the tone differences. What does it mean to watch or not watch these shows based on like age appropriateness and other things we've discussed over the course of the season. But I guess the thing that frustrates me is just knowing how long all this stuff takes. I kind of wish this cliffhanger didn't exist at all, because I think it maybe leaves the characters in a far more optimistic note than I would have expected given how the previous episode ended. But that would have, much like season 1 of Peacemaker, I want to see what these characters do next. But if I got nothing else, that was a deeply satisfying season of television. I wouldn't go that far with describing season 2, but it would have been another entertaining, interesting, insightful adventure with these characters. Hope we get another. And instead, what we're left with is the cliffhangeriest. I mean, we hear like dinosaur, like monster noises, and as he runs off, and then I'm left to wonder, when will I see the resolution of any of this? I have no idea. So I'm not super mad about it because I think it wraps up the characters in a pretty decent way. But I found that part of it unfulfilling and frustrating, especially the way Gunn has talked about how he wants to handle connective tissues and cliffhangers and keeping audiences hanging between episodes or installments of their characters.
I'm going to put this out there as well, Patrick. Early on this season, we discussed how many talent behind the show were saying the last 3 episodes is like a whole different show. And I don't know that it really lived up to that. I mean, yes, some of the Earth X stuff was like genuinely thrilling. You know, I thought the shootout, like all the action that happens at the end of episode 6 and into episode 7, like some of it was good. But if you told me to watch the whole season, you're like, which 3 episodes are different than the rest? I would be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So that was it was an odd kind of way to market the show. But Seattle KO, by the way, the chat says maybe the show becomes a Checkmate spinoff with Peacemaker off the board. Maybe it's just maybe the show is just Checkmate. No,
his helmet does have that sort of like top of a chess piece vibe to it. So,
but yeah, Patrick, you're right that like it's gonna be wild if in Man of Tomorrow Superman like enters the dimension that Chris Smith is at. The only one man can help Superman get out of this situation, Chris Smith, and then he needs to like find his way into the dimension to break him out. That would be pretty extreme. All that said, Dan Gvozden, any thoughts on where this season leaves Peacemaker off as we wrap up this conversation?
I would be totally fine with a 5-second cameo, like glimpse into that world, and it's just Chris riding a dinosaur. You know, like he's become like the king of the savages. You know, in this world,
right? Because we don't know what those like strange creatures are, right? Like there's some weird creatures in the forest.
They can be tiny. Like for all we know, they are.
They're more of those.
Oh no, they're friendly.
They're those Candyland
like
gremlins.
part of their society.
Yeah. I would expect something more like that. You know, without getting too like speculative, about this, I do think, first of all, I'm not as worried about the whole, like, how long until we see X, Y, and Z again. I think they, was I super satisfied with the way that we got to the conclusion of the character arcs? Maybe not, but it did end. This is just a coda, like all comic books or comic book material to hook you on for the next thing. And, given the gap between Superman and this being so tight, as we've often commented, like I have faith that Gunn will find ways to keep this active in our minds in some way, whether it's Chris with all of his clothing torn to pieces, riding a T-Rex, through a clearing or whatever in the next Superman movie, which is like, what, how many years away? 2 years away until we even see that. And fine, take your time, make it good. I think the stuff that they're playing with, like whether it's mother boxes, boom tubes, or whatever, like we know that this whole chapter of the DCU, James Gunn is calling Gods and Monsters. I think, without getting too spoilery about what I know about the storyline around this planet, I think some of the reveals that happened in the comics are bound to happen in the movies, and it will be more tied to the themes of gods and monsters than we currently know. And we're just seeing a little sliver of it. And so I think it may feel like Chris was abandoned in some place that we're never going to see, except that it's a backwater thing. I think there's more to be learned there that will make it more relevant than people realize.
Fair enough. A bold prediction from Dan Gvozden. We're going to wrap up here soon. If you're in the chat and watching this, you have any final comments or questions you want us to address, now is the time to put them in, because we're gonna end this broadcast soon. And of course, if you're listening to the podcast version of this, be sure to subscribe to us at youtube.com/@decodingtv, where you'll get notifications for future broadcasts like this. This has been super fun, by the way, like hanging out with folks in the chat and reading the reactions. So I'm glad we did this and hope we get to do it again. I think as we're wrapping up, right, I am left with a lingering sense of disappointment about the alternate dimension stuff. And specifically, I think that we had praised this season a lot for introducing some really interesting questions with the alternate dimension. Like, oh, if you could take the place of your alternate dimension self, like, would you do that? Like, what are the implications of that? And in many ways, this show has raised questions about the alternate dimension stuff that is more interesting than how Marvel has handled multiverse stuff. Like, Marvel's handling of multiverse stuff seems largely to be, hey, we can introduce like all kinds of random ass characters from the
fun
past.
Cameos.
Like, look, Andrew Garfield can be in the Spider-Man movie, like that kind of stuff. Whereas this movie actually tries to ask, like, this movie is closer to source code in terms of like, oh, if you
Yes.
could take the place of some other dude, like what would that be like? And that's kind of interesting. Um, what are the implications of a world where there are no people of color? Not really going to explore it at all. Like, not even really going to get that much into it. There is this sentence that Adebayo says, like, maybe we're not so different after all. Like, maybe Nazi Planet is not so different from our universe, and that's about as pointed as the critique gets. Sadly, like it's. I was hoping for something with more depth and nuance, and something that would really, I think, as Dan indicated, like shock people out of their complacency a little bit more. And I don't know that it fully did that. I don't know that it feels to me a lot like James Gunn is preaching to the choir here, and that's fine. Like it's not like the worst thing in the world to do, but I wanted it to kind of make a strong case for why this alternate Earth X universe is bad, other than, of course, the self-evident reason that like we shouldn't subjugate people of color. Like the people who believe that have been saying that it's not getting through to the other side, right? So like,
I mean, if anything, the depiction of this bolsters the case in the opposite direction, which is like,
100%.
seems fine. Like,
seems fine.
That
Seems
line,
fine.
that line from Adebayo, being like, oh, hey, like our world isn't, like, look, I don't love like this Earth, the one we are currently occupying, not the DC Earth. Like I don't find that one, like our creep towards authoritarianism, like all that comfortable. But I think I can tell the difference between the one that I'm living in and one where Nazis won World War II. Like I have to think that it would be dramatically different things, as displeased as I am with the current world that I'm living in.
Yeah, so that's disappointing. I do want to say, give a shout out though. Like one of the things that somebody pointed out last week that I thought was good, like a couple weeks ago, was Adrian going to his house, and he's like, "Look, life is amazing in this universe. My dad's not gay, right?" And it's like, oh, actually, I don't know if that's actually true. Like, and in fact, maybe he is gay and just hasn't been able to admit to it because of his, so there are like some subtle touches in there that are kind of well done.
That moment is haunting too, because his parents are just sitting on the couch, like completely unaware of the world around them, and not even sitting near each other. Like it's just a creepy portrait that I can't
Agreed.
shake.
Agreed. So there were some cool aspects to it, and of course the shock of everyone going after Adebayo like is really upsetting, but yeah, ultimately, like it raises some really interesting issues. I don't think it fully delivers on them. It's a fun. This show is a fun hang, right? It's a fun hang, not a bad show, not a bad season, but it could have been transcendently good. It could have been transcendently thought provoking, and instead it was not. It felt really rushed in some parts and really slow in other parts, like this episode with all the montages, and so. Yeah, ends up not really sticking the landing, but I can't say it's bad. I can't say like don't watch it. It's just kind of like, yeah, I wish it had been. I wish they had stuck the landing a little bit better. So anyway, that is going to bring us to the end of this week's episode of the podcast. Dan Gvozden, thank you for joining us today. If you are enjoying what Dan's work and commentary, subscribe to the decodingtv.com newsletter. And be sure to check out Dan's work over at the Amazing Spider Talk podcast. Dan, thanks for chatting today.
It's been great. And if you're looking forward to some of that speculation stuff I lightly touched on here, I'll definitely be getting deep into it in the newsletter. So make sure you subscribe and check out my piece this week.
A couple more comments in the chat, actually, that I want to address. First of all, Alex Sharman in the chat says, Eagly survived the season, thank God. Like, I don't think we ever really got an explanation for what the hell is going on with Eagly this season, right?
I never want it. I want that to be a secret that we share, the audience and Eagly, and no one else ever finds out.
Yeah, fair enough. Hey there, that you in the chat says, what if the cliffhanger was Chris screaming to Rick Sr., he's alive? I think that would have been pretty funny. So.
Not my boat.
This is Severance season 1. Chris Smith watched Severance season 1 during between season 1 and 2 of Peacemaker. Anyway, all right, that is the end. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us for this chat. Thanks to everyone who's a paid subscriber at decodingtv.com, keeping this podcast going. Thanks to Dan Gvozden. Thanks to Patrick Klepek for chatting this evening right after the finale is aired. He's Patrick Klepek. I'm David Chen. And we'll see you next week right here on Decoding TV. Goodbye.